Da da da! What's my good chair? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside, and I got out for a little bit today. Oh, I dragged my butt. I was going to go out and go for a nice long walk. I ended up going for a nice long walk, but it was later on in the afternoon. I was so immersed in what I was doing, in different things that were coming across my path, and I listened to myself. And for the most part, I kept my butt in my chair and I listened in, right? I listened in and I really did absorb other people's messages out there. And in that, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to talk about tonight. Two of my mission statements. If you've been with me for any length of time, like Tammy here, hello, Tammy. How's your day been going? Have you had a nice day today? It was warm today. That's why I wanted to get outside to go for a walk today because we're looking at some rain this week. Hot weather, summer is here. We didn't get a spring. We went straight from winter to summer this year. But today was the one day that it was going to be sunny and high temperatures. So I took that opportunity, excuse me. I took that opportunity to make sure that I got out today, kind of having an inkling that it's going to be an indoor day for a couple of days. So I wanted to make sure that I got out today. I actually walked down to the legislative building. We have a beautiful legislative building. It's like, I don't know, it's like a castle. It's just amazing. And I can see it actually, the top part of it from my apartment, and I sit here sometimes and I look at it. It's not a long walk. Takes me maybe 20 minutes to walk there. And you walk over the bridge and over the river. So I just kind of dangle off of the bridge and look at the water moving. And look how low the bank is already. Usually the water is still pretty high at this time of year, but it is kind of low. It kind of makes me wonder, what it's going to look like, right? In the middle of July, how low it's going to be, right? I have a favorite bottle dump that I like to go hang out at, but I only have access to it if the water is low. So I'm not looking forward to having uh, the low water levels, but at the same time, it won't be so discouraging to me because it'll be kind of fun. I'll be able to go out and do a little bit of mudlarking. It was an old pop pop bottle manufacturing company that made pop in the early or maybe the late 1800s, early 1900s, and unfortunately, they would throw the broken bottles and the cracked bottles, they would throw them into the river. They didn't quite, right? They weren't very good stewards of the environment back then. It was just a place to get rid of garbage, right? And I've had some good luck in doing some mudlarking here in Winnipeg. We have two major rivers that intersect in the city, the Red River and the Assiniboine River. Hello, Eugene. The Red River and the Assiniboine River. And so it's always been fun to go down to the banks and pick up old bone buttons and ice skates and tub parts and my garden pot. I got $50 for my garden pot. I sold that last week or the week before. I had a beautiful antique garden pot, not even one chip in it. And I dug that out of this old dump that was across from the Forks, which is a kind of a tourist attraction here in Winnipeg. The Forks, where the two rivers meet, have been a meeting place for Indigenous for thousands of years. And then earlier in the 19th century, they had dairies in there. So when they had horse and buggy and they would deliver milk to people's houses, they kept the stables, the horses there. They manufactured, I guess they had the cattle there too to get the milk. I don't know. I haven't delved into the history too much of this, but it when the company ended, they were abandoned buildings and they were abandoned for quite a while. But they utilized the building and renovated them, restored some of them, and they turned them into restaurants and art galleries and shops and entertainment. And because it's always been a meeting place where the two rivers have crossed, they wanted to keep it like that. So it is a meeting place. So you can go out there and there's beach chairs all over the place and bars and restaurants, and they have events all the time. They have ferries. You can hop on a ferry and go up and down the river on the ferry. And it's a lot of fun. But right across from there, because the old forts was there, they only have the gates of the forts left, right? But the old fort from the Selkirk settlement, they were from Scotland and they came here into Winnipeg and they settled it through the Hudson Bay Company. They got a little bit of land, which was Winnipeg, right? And it's much more expanded now by a ton. At that time, it was just a fort and they had lots of problems, right? Lots of problems living here. They weren't always wanted, right? But that's the thing, it takes a while to get used to people. And like I say, you guys hear me say all the time, sometimes it starts with tolerance, but it takes a while to even get to that point of tolerance, doesn't it? I think we live in a more tolerant world at this moment. The way things are going, you might not think so. But if you were to go back hundreds of years or 1,000 years and look at the constant battles, the land grabbing, all the resources, and it was really quite terrible back then. But because we live in this moment, we all think that this is the worst of times. But I tell ya, I would want to go back 1,000 years. I'm quite content to be here in this moment, to be able to have the opportunity to delve into history at my leisure and not be traumatized by that. Because, we talk about trauma now, but a lot of our trauma is residue from our ancestry, right? If you want to talk about trauma, like go back 1,000 years, right? And there are some countries who actually in this moment have been traumatized, persecuted for 1,000 years, right? Like the Ukraine has always been a persecuted country. I don't know why. It's the people just seem so beautiful. Here in Manitoba, we have a huge Ukrainian community. We love pierogies and borscht and cabbage rolls, right? Baklava, right? And the little wooden dolls inside of each other. And we love the people of the Ukraine. We love their churches. Their churches are absolutely beautiful. You might not know this. This is a little bit of a tidbit. Um, when I say the Ukrainians have been persecuted for a very long time, they have been. Most of it was over the religion, right? Because they were Russian Orthodox, is their religion. So if you think of the Russian churches with the great big onion domes, beautifully painted and everything, that was their religion. When they came to Canada, they fought, not literally fought, but they argued their perspective, what they wanted, and they actually made the Ukrainian Orthodox Church here, and it has to be sanctioned by their higher ups in their religion. I'm not an expert in the Ukrainian um, or the Orthodox religion in any way, but I know it had to be sanctioned, and they wouldn't sanction it, but they kind of went in the back door, and there were higher ups already established in the states, and these gentlemen sanctioned so that they could have the Ukrainian Orthodox Church here in Canada. It's their own religion, right? It's kind of amazing little tidbit of history. And they are a part of this community, or we are also a part of their community. But where was I going with that? Oh, we were talking about the persecution and trauma, right? But these things are passed down from generation to generation, which kind of leads me in to my topic of discussion to get away from my mudlarking stories, right? But I wanted to delve in a little bit in two of my mission statements. If you've been with me for any length of time, you would have heard them. The first one is this one here. This is an old plaque that my dad had nailed. So you can see the nail hole. He had it nailed into the wall beside his lazy boy chair. And it meant a lot to him. When my father passed away, I didn't take much. I took an old sweater, a couple of pieces of his jewelry, and I this old peeling plaque. And it's been with me ever since. And I wasn't woke to any of these ideas, but I knew how much this plaque meant to my father. And then when I did wake up to some of these ideas, I woke up to this idea, right? Life is what happens to us while we are making other plans, right? While we're making other plans. And that's the thing. We can't just wait for life to happen to us. We have to live our life. Life is what happens while we are making other plans, right? So that's the idea, is to put one foot in front of another, create the best life for ourselves as we possibly can, do better in this generation than we did in the last generation or in the last 1,000 years, and just get better and better and better to the point where my second mission statement, if you've been with me for any length of time, you would have heard this one too. It takes all kinds to make the world. And I truly, truly, truly believe that with my whole heart, right? We're not quite there yet, right? People think they're better than others. Some countries think they have the rights to other countries and other peoples. And that was where the tension is. That's where we make our mistakes. That's where we don't show ourselves well. We're not quite there yet. And yes, in this moment, because this is our life right now, this isn't our grandparents' life. They had their day in the sun, if you want to put it that way. They had their opportunity to make a better life. And they did. They made this beautiful country that I live in. My grandfathers on both sides were settlers to this continent, right? My grandfather on my dad's side was an American, I do believe, because he was part of the Co gang. They hung out with, I think, Billy the Kid. They were train robbers. I don't know. I laugh at that, right? Because we don't have those kind of people in our family anymore. And that is my history. That is the epigenetics of my own family. You know, we can see how trauma would be uh, uh, relevant, right? Or prevalent in my family through that. My grandfather on my mother's side um, was disowned by his family. They gave him a living inheritance and sent him on his way. And he came to Canada as an adventurer. And he met my grandmother in Ontario and they traveled to British Columbia. My grandfather owned the entire delta in British Columbia. Um, when he passed away, he sold the land to Dairyland and Boeing. So the story goes. My mother didn't get very much money at that time, right? We're getting better. Women didn't mean much, right? So my mother and my grandmother, I think, got $20,000 out of what was left of my grandfather's money, and he had two sons, and his sons got the rest of it. And now the Delta is part of Vancouver almost, right? It's a subsidiary. Is that what you call them? Uh, yeah, it's part of British Columbia, but it's its own city. When my grandfather owned it, it was just marshland. It was just marshland, and so that's the way the story goes, right? And I'm sure there's more to that story. And I bet you there's a lot of beautifying in that story. But I tell the story as I know it, right? And um, yeah, it's kind of interesting because there would have been traumas in that moving to this country from a homeland when you had life easy, you were born with opportunities, and yet you find yourself in a totally different country, in a totally different life, right? My grandfather ended up being a dairy farmer, right? He had land and he used it for cattle and dairy, and it makes it interesting, and it makes it something that we should have to appreciate because, right? I don't think I would be that inclined to be a farmer, right? I did that life for like 6 months when my parents moved us out to a farm up north in British Columbia. It was an experience, not one of my favorites, but it was an experience. But it's in our difficulties that we learn, right? And these experiences um, offer up opportunities to express, right? To have insights to what we do want and what we don't want. And even though that wouldn't have been a life for me, it was a life that my grandfather expanded into, that he was optimistic that he could make a living at. And supposedly he did. But these experiences can be harsh. They can be hard. Can you imagine coming to a new country and getting a little piece of land and making it work, right? Making it work with no guarantees that it would work. in a land that is harsh, and also in that status, because even though they were coming here to this country, there would, right? My father would not have had a shot at marrying my mother if my grandfather was alive because of that hierarchy, right? There was the money, and right, and then my dad's side who were train robbers, like, right? That would never have happened. But sometimes it starts with, well, just an opportunity, right? Just a choice, right? Just a choice, and putting that action in towards a choice and doing your very best with that. And knowing that it's going to be hard, knowing that it's going to be difficult, right? But just starting there. And if you're going to get flack or feedback from people or organizations who feel that they're above you, that they have a say in what you're going to do, right? Sometimes you can do something about it. Lots of times we find that we just have to ride those waves. We have to adapt and conquer and wait for that moment that we can build or have an opportunity to get a little bit of tolerance, right? And then over the years or decades, sometimes lifetimes that it takes, that it manages to get to the point where it's acceptance, right? And then after acceptance comes welcoming as a global community. We're not quite there yet. We're not quite there yet. And when it comes to trauma, again, we're not quite there yet. But it does take all kinds to make the world, right? We're just not quite there yet. And it's in our evolution, and it's just going, right? It's not going to be in our generation, might not even be in the next generation or the generation after that. But we are going to start, and we have started, right? We have started. Every generation gets a little bit better, a little bit better, more opportunities, technology, science, medicine, space, right? And it'll get to the point where finally we will truly understand that quote of mine. And it's not my quote. And it feeds into this idea of it takes all kinds to make the world, because that quote came from a little 16-year-old lazy butt kid that the company that I worked for hired, and he was useless, like absolutely just useless. He just was there for a free paycheck, and there was nothing that irked me more than somebody who was just looking for a free paycheck. Came in, clocked out, and never did anything. But he was smiling all the time. He was super pleasant all the time. One night I was working, and it was a retail lumber store like Home Depot, right? And he was sitting up at the cash register on the counter, and he was chatting up the cashier. He was hitting on the cashier. He was 16 years old, hitting on the cashier, chatting her up. Cindy had a breaking point. I stormed up there because by then we're working on skeleton crew, right? He's my only extra hand. What are you doing? He goes, "Oh, we're just talking." What are you doing sitting on the counter? Like the customers can't even get their things on the counter. And the cashier can't even get her job done. Don't you have something to do? And he looked at me and he says, "Cindy, calm down. It takes all kinds to make the world." Oh my goodness. I burst out laughing at that because he recognized that he was a little lazy, right? But he was only a kid, too. He was 16 years old, right? With no experience and no discipline, no guidance, no supervision in any way. We're going to just stop here for a second, send out some good cheer, get to your destination, let it be a false alarm that you can knock on that door and they can say, everything, everything is good. You can go back to the station. If you guys don't know, I live behind a fire station. Me and Tammy are quite we're quite comfortable, and Eugene quite comfortable with these fire trucks going by all the time. Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate it, and I bet you they appreciate it too. But after he said that to me, I never laughed so hard ever. My belly hurt. I remember, I could see it in my mind right now, him sitting up there and he's just hitting on this cashier, right? And I'm trying to get the job done. I'm working every single department in that store, and it was a big store too. But I was trying to keep my job because they were trying to get rid of everybody. They only wanted those little part-time 16-year-old kids like the one sitting on the counter chatting up the cashier. And I had just snapped at that moment. But after that, I loved that kid, right? Because sometimes, and this is a trait that my husband had, and it was a big lesson for me. I try to follow suit in that, in my memory of how much everybody loved my husband, right? But in the military, you know, it's important. My husband was not the very best. He was like that 16-year-old kid sitting on the counter chatting up the cashier. Maybe not as bad. But, right? They would find my husband sleeping under the big trucks all the time, right? When he was working in they called them stores and stuff, when they had to fix the trucks and stuff. He was always looking for the easiest out, the fastest way. He was a big bypasser, my husband was. But one thing my husband had was his good cheer. People loved my husband. The guys that he worked with loved my husband. His higher ups, the corporals, the master corporals, the sergeants loved my husband. And if you know anything about the military, you didn't hang out with the grunts. You didn't hang out with the privates and the corporals. You just didn't, right? You weren't welcome because again, it's that hierarchy. But because my husband brought that to the table, his good cheer, his willingness to step forward and offer help before the help was even asked for. He was the first person to volunteer himself, right, for anything that needed servicing, right? And they loved him. And it was kind of neat because when I got married, my husband had already started moving up the ranks by then. He had a lot of help from his friends, definitely, right? Um, we got married, he was a corporal, and our wedding guest list were full of master corporals and sergeants and military police and just padres and just so many high-ranking people in the military, and it was such a beautiful thing. And if you know anything, when they go out to the field in their training, they even if they're not going on tours and they're going out to the field, they're away from their wife and children for months at a time, right? It's hard. And my husband always kept up the good cheer, always kept the morale up in his battalion. And it was something that I appreciated. You know, when I tell that story of that 16-year-old kid, right? That was my husband too. And that's important. And so I fell in love with that little 16-year-old kid. He kept us laughing. He kept us having uh, easier emotionally and mentally in that position that we had, because at the time this company was trying to move everybody along because they wanted to instill only part-time people in the positions, right? And so it was like very stressful for all of us because we were all trying to cross train ourselves, make ourselves indispensable, doing twice the work and doing whatever we had to keep our jobs. But he, that 16-year-old kid, kept our morale up until management watched the cameras and saw what he was doing, and then he was on his then he was on his way. But while he was there, it was a good time, right? And so when I say it takes all kinds to make the world, everybody plays a role in it, right? Everybody has something to contribute in being the stewards of their friends, their family, their small community, maybe the larger community. Everybody has a role to play. It's like the villages, right? 1,000 years ago, you would have had a blacksmith, you would have had a baker, you would have had candlestick maker, right? You would have had like like different positions that would hold that community together because everybody had strengths. Nobody could do everything, though some people thought they could. And then also, you have to take into consideration those people who didn't do the work themselves but were good designators, right? And I think, when it came towards the end of my career, right, I was a great designator. In my experience, maybe I couldn't do all those positions and all those jobs and all that heavy 50-pound bags of concrete, right? I couldn't do that anymore, but I knew it had to be done. I knew how it to be done, and I know who should be doing that, who had the skills and the capability of getting that done. And that is something that is really needed in this world too. Those are the leaders with the insights, with the know-how, and not necessarily the physical capacity to do it themselves. Maybe they have the physical capacity to do it themselves, but if they're multitasking, if they're cross training, right, you get to be okay at a whole bunch of things, but not be an expert in one thing, right? And that's what communities do for us, right? It takes all kinds to make the world. And if you think we're not there yet, you're probably right. We are not even close to being there yet. But every year, every decade, every generation, we get better and better and better. And sometimes it does start with just tolerance. Sometimes it's not even tolerance. But I would like to think that we're not going to be warring like we did 1,000 years ago, that we're not so discriminatory now, that we're not willing to look at somebody who looks different than us, who speaks different than us, who has a different religion than we do. That we can move with values, with common courtesy and be able to get along with each other until we can get ourselves to that point where we can become accepting of something that we couldn't even tolerate 10 years ago or 10 generations ago, right? And then to the point where we become accepting and welcoming. Welcoming, right? It was only 60 years ago when that little black girl got on that school bus when segregation was going on, right? And she was determined to be on that bus. And she went to a school that was amalgamated for the very first time. Was it comfortable? No, but they didn't have much choice because new laws had come into effect. So they had to start with tolerance. And tolerance, sometimes there's still chattering going on in the background. That when they're seen on the streets, there's still the spitballs and the name calling. And that probably went on for another 10 years. By the time I was in high school, right, it was nothing to see a black man and a Caucasian woman walking down the cigarette or sidewalks holding hands and then having babies. And now we don't even think twice about it, right? We don't even think twice about it. And then you can apply that same scenario in so many other different things, right? Like the 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 gay and lesbian movement that went on. Like that took some time, didn't it? It started with intolerance, right? You could be put to death and still can be in some countries for being gay. But if you're in North America, now it's nothing, right? Nobody is keeping it a secret. If that's a part of them, that's a part of them, right? And we have parades, we have pride parades now. And we don't look at it any differently. I mean, walking home from the legislative building tonight, I was walking over the bridge and there were two young teenage girls holding hands, right, as a couple. And they walked by me and I smiled at them, right? Just kind of like a hello, right? Just kind of like a hello. But sometimes that's where it starts, right? Until it gets to the point where we're not even thinking twice about it. And then we're welcoming it. We're making new laws to accommodate these families. They can get married and they can adopt children and they can collect pensions, right? And it's a beautiful thing, right? But not to everybody's eyes because we're not quite there yet, right? We're not quite there yet. But if we've gotten this far, right, maybe we can get a little bit further, right? Maybe we can get a little bit further. We live so close in this age of AI learning, in this digital platforms that we're on, that, you know, I can talk to people, you can talk to people anywheres out in the world right now, this close. And there are still countries, there are still religions fighting with each other. And, you know, in the topics that I kind of move in, there are so many different religions that I didn't even know it existed 10 years ago. And that's the truth. That's the truth. And the ones that I did know about, I didn't know too much about, right? I didn't know too much about. But this age of AI learning has made it a great opportunity to learn about our neighbors, to learn about other cultures, other religions. You know what? I have a list here. Quick. Okay. Um, I have 54. I call them thought leaders, content creators, teachers, lecturers, professors, right? Friends, family. I don't have any friends and family written down here, but I should, right? But these are people that I don't want to forget. I made a list of people who have, lots of people have contributed to my insights. Lots of people have, right? But there's specifically these 54 people here have contributed to who I am in this moment. And, you know, I'm not going to say who they are or what countries they come from, but I can tell you they come from all the countries of the world, right? And they are amazing creators. One thing I do have to say here, though, of these 54 contributors to, I am a community project. I am a we're all a community project if we choose to be, right? Or we could be self-centered, meaning we could just be on our own, right? And only listening to ourselves and not expanding in any way. Here we go, Tammy. Sending out some good cheer. Get to your destination. Be a false alarm. We got a fire truck and we've got the supervisor driving by, and he's got like a big red truck too, but it's like um, a pickup truck, a big pickup SUV type truck that he has. Get to your destination, be a false alarm, turn around, go right back to the station. Yes, so yeah, I but these are my special people, and everybody out there has that opportunity to make their own little collection of contributors, right? Because we are a synthesis of others, each and every one of us. I don't want to be my parents, right? I have traits of both. I have traits of my sisters. I've got understandings of from my teachers and my hobbies and the kids in school and my peers in each and every one of those jobs that I ever had. And it's kind of amazing that I get to delve in and create myself. But I created myself by sitting in conversations, living vicariously through other people's experiences, and realizing for myself who I am, right? Now, I'm not going to say their names, but let me say maybe I won't be able to pick up their religions, but I can tell you the categories that they're in. I've got thought leader, uh, a professor of psychology, uh, and expert in narcissism. I have a, a spiritual tarot card reader. I have a rabbi. I have um, I have another tarot card reader, but she's also an intuitive. Also, I have another intuitive. I have this is animated, but it's psychology. They're actually um, legit psychologists, but they present their content through animation, right? I have I have this gentleman here. He reads the full moons, right? And he's also very genuine in his presentation. I learned a lot from him. Priority is that you can be yourself, right? You can be genuine. And it has helped me so much in being comfortable in what I'm doing. This gentleman here helps empaths. Um, this other gentleman here, he's metal detectorist. And I left him on the list too because he brings so much to my system and keeping my system calm when I get punch drunk by so much information that I can go off and immerse myself vicariously through his adventures out in the forest that I just love him to death. Uh, Historian. Uh, this gentleman is an expert in history. So, if anything architectural or anything to do with discoveries of archaeology or the Neanderthals or any one of the humans in our histories, he gets that information up to us right away. And so he's been one of my top favorites whenever he post content. I'm on it. I have a radio podcast interviewer here, and I have an expert in uh, avoidance. This lady, she's an expert in avoidant relationships. And I have another one here who is also a professor of psychology. I have, um, oh my goodness, there's so many here. Oh, I could just go on and on. I've got well, somebody here that I appreciate is well, I can't say their names. It wouldn't be right. But what I was going to say earlier, and I did because the fire truck's going by, of these 54 people that have contributed to my understandings, only 7 of them are women, right? So when we talk about it takes all kinds to make the world, we still have some work to do in allowing the women to have the forefront, to be the experts in what they do. I am not discriminatory, right? That I've just got to learn off of men because I just want to learn off of the best, right? And it's not necessarily because they are men. I enjoy taking lessons from the women too, but they have to be the best. And there are lots of women doing a great job, but right, it's going to take some time, right? Women's liberation has been around since the 50s, maybe right after the well, during the Second World War, because they're the ones that were holding up the ship when the guys went to fight, right? So it started back then, and it has been a slow process, and we haven't done a very good job because the women have been juggling everything, right? Because they had to fight for their leadership. They had to fight to be able to have that respect. But part of that was you still got to change the diapers. You still got to have dinner on the table. You still got to clean the house and get the groceries done. But yeah, then you can have your job, right? And they're getting it done. But remember what I said, sometimes when you're doing so many jobs, you don't get to be the expert in just one because you're doing mediocre in absolutely everything because you got so much to do, right? I got channelers here, right? I've got another psychotherapist here. I've got Reiki here. I got another Reiki here. I've got another historian here. I got biologists and doctors and more thought leaders and more thought leaders and adventurers. Oh my goodness, like so I've got CIA agents. I don't know how that came across my path, but it has helped me out lots in really understanding manipulation, right? Because there's a big difference between influence and manipulation. And I find that, my upbringing and my life, quite a bit of it was manipulated, right? It wasn't by free choice, it was kind of projected and expected out of me, and that's the way that I grew up. So it takes a lot to untangle those wires, and it took years and years, and I'm not even close to being done. But it's great to be able to understand what happened, right? And so I'm glad the CIA, ex-CIA agent is on my list. I got gurus. I got YouTube content experts that help me to be a better content creator here on YouTube, being part of the YouTube creator, our community, right? I've got uh, experts in mythology. I've got this gentleman. He just wants us to think deep, right? So he's does all kinds of topics. I've got shamans here. This gentleman here is all about archetypes and the stars, right? Oh my goodness, another psychologist here. I've even got psychologists here that aren't here anymore. They've passed away. I've got another thought leader here who has passed away. Like it just goes on and on and on. And, this idea that it takes all kinds to make the world. I wouldn't be sitting here right now if I didn't have all these kinds, right? I'm still me. I'm still doing my thing, but I couldn't have done it without all these insights and all these contributors and all these examples. And that's the idea, that we become the examples to each other so that we can learn to fill our own gaps, right? Because, what happens when the meteor hits the earth, right? We are all going to be on our own. We're all going to need to, right, build those communities of bakers and blacksmiths and candlestick makers. But we need to learn off of each other so that we can be self sufficient, so that each one of us could survive in that. Because, again, it's in that hierarchy, and we don't want to be in a bucket of crabs trying to get out of this bucket of crabs, but standing on other people's heads trying to get out of that bucket, right? We should all be able to get out of that bucket together. And sometimes when you get yourself in those traumatic experiences that happen, right? Earth has almost come to extinction 6 times now in the past how many million years? 6 times. And just because we've gotten through it barely, right? Because at one point there were just a few of us left over in the warmest spot in Africa. We managed to survive in that until we, right, slowly moved out and expanded again. But that doesn't mean that these experiences might not happen again. Life is what happens to us while we're making other plans. And so it's about being prepared. And because this world is so close now, that we have to take into consideration, we are a global community now. That community is just not in our homes. When I grew up, that was my community, was my household, right? That's the way that it was created. And that's the way that I experienced it. And I never felt like I was part of a larger community till pretty much after I got out of high school, right? I would have loved to have accumulated that experience while I was in school, right? Things might have turned out a little bit different for me. But without those experiences, right, I might not have woken up to any ideas. And if I had woken up to any ideas, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now, right? And appreciating all the amazing people that have contributed to that. And I have to say, too, the people who have kept me company have been great contributors to where I'm at right now. They've kept me going in that idea of never giving up, one foot in front of another, and not just being my own cheerleader, but, right, having that privilege, that honor of having cheerleaders hang out with me over the course of these 10, 12 years that I have been on YouTube. It has been an experience, a learning experience, right? But I understand life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. It's going to rain tomorrow. So tonight I went for a walk and it was a beautiful walk. I did a little bit of tree hugging along the river, took my time, right? Took my time, admired our beautiful legislative building, enjoyed hanging over the bridge and staring at the water and the banks being so low in the levels, right? It was a nice day. And all of that contributes to making the day a good day, right? So those two mission statements of mine, if you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, right? Life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. Great lesson from my father, my father's plaque, this old peeling plaque. I've got this letter, it's coming off here. I'm really curious as to what I wrote on it. Few places in my apartment, I have written affirmations and abundance wishes, like wish lists and stuff. And it's kind of going to be fun. But I said, until I really make it where I want to make it to, then one day I'm going to just pull this off and we're going to read it and we'll see how close we actually got. But yes, life is what happens to us while we're making other plans. But understanding also, it takes all kinds to make the world. Okay, you guys, let's have a sip of my juice. And we're going to pull a card. Maybe it'll be pertinent to the conversation. Maybe it won't. 54 powerful words if you've never hung out with me before. We grab a card at the end of every live. We just go into it. It's the first thing that comes to my mind. Sometimes it's a story. Sometimes it's a perspective. Sometimes it's somebody else's insight. Like I said, I got lots of contributors, right? But that's the idea that we all learn from each other, right? We all learn from each other. Understanding it takes all kinds. And I would hate to think that, that some of these people wouldn't be recognized in what they contributed because of their understandings, because of their religious ideas or political ideas or, the groups that they hang out in their networks, their families, their problems, right? Because somebody else thinks they're not worthy. Sometimes it starts with tolerance, right? Okay, you guys, let's grab a card, call it a night. Oh, it's Friday, you guys. Is it Friday today? Not quite sure. Let me take a look here. Oh my goodness, my days are blending in. Yes, it's Friday. You guys, I won't be back in until Sunday. If you want to come in and hang out with us, Chatters Live. I have a great crew over there that have contributed a great deal. If you want to be enveloped, if you want to hang out in the background and just listen in, you're welcome to. That's Sunday night, 7:30 Central. If not, I'll be back on Monday with this show, and we'll just get into another topic of discussion. Okay, you guys, here we go. Take this card. This card is the third time in my last 7 podcasts. I'm pretty certain of it. Tammy, if you can confirm that with me, we have had this card a few times. I have 54 powerful words. I still have words in this deck that I have not even pulled yet. It is in the patterning, right? Change is always the result of an action, right? Always moving forward, always, right? My plaque. Life is what happens to you while you're making other plans, right? Just to live your life, create the best life for yourself, the best life for your family as you possibly can. Understanding that those wrenches are going to be thrown into it, those problems, those catastrophes, those those meteors, right? Something is always going to drop into your life. So live your life. Put that action in. Contribute to your well-being, contribute to your evolution and the evolution of your children and your children's children, right? Change is always the result of an action. And I would much rather that change come from the action that I've made, right? With the lessons that I've got under my belt, than have the be all to end all to pop into my life, drop something huge into my life, put me on a spin that makes it so that none of it mattered, right? None of it mattered. But it was a good time. It gave us something to contribute. It kept our emotional and mental well being going in a process that starts with tolerance. And if we can just start, if we could just put one foot in front of another, eventually we'll get to, well, welcoming, acceptance, right? That's something that we were always meant to go to, because whoever or whatever helps those who help themselves. Okay, you guys, that's my good chair. And we'll see you on Sunday. You guys have a great night. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Eugene, for popping in.